If you're Redskins management, what do you want to happen that best benefits the team with Kirk Cousins?
Well, I think you want to try and work out a deal that makes sense for everybody. And it's a question I get all the time. What are the Redskins going to do with Kirk Cousins? It's almost like, what's Kirk Cousins going to do with the Redskins? Simply because the Redskins don't only have to sign Kirk. If they commit $24 million to him in a franchise tag, which they have, then you still have Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Chris Baker. You still need defensive help on the other side of the ball. There's a lot of pieces that need to be put together on that football team and people that need to be signed to commit money to, even though the cap's at 166. I would think that in earnest now they should start the negotiations up until July 15th, because after that he's committed. And the only negative on Kirk's side is, number one, Matt Cavanaugh has taken over as a coordinator. So I don't know if he's going to put the kind of numbers up, because Matt will probably want to run the football more. As a football team, they'll want to run the football more. So maybe you're not going to see 4,500 yards, which somebody will say, well, see, I told you he couldn't. But I think he's a franchise quarterback. I think he deserves somewhere between 110 and 120 million. But now it has to be spread out over a period of time. The big thing, Dan, is what's the bonus going to be and what's the injury guarantee? That's normally about 45 to 48% of the contract. Those are the guarantees. Take for example, Tony Romo's cap number is 24.7, 14 guaranteed. That's the end of a contract. Guys never see that. So I think the Redskins are trying to put together a deal where it works for them from a business standpoint, but also is fair to Kirk based on market value.
But how difficult is it to build a team around Kirk Cousins with that salary of Kirk Cousins?
Well, with the cap going to 166, it may not be that difficult. You're probably going to lose at least one of the receivers, Pierre or Deshaun. That's sort of a given. What's Chris Baker going to get as a defensive lineman? The big question is, what's it going to cost you in the free agent market to upgrade your secondary if you're going there? Because the draft now is insignificant when it comes to numbers. The draft numbers are so little. I mean, take a look at Dak's salary as an example. And by the way, Dak and Kirk were both fourth-round picks. I agree with you. You don't have to reach in any of these drafts. None of these kids coming out today, to me, warrant a first-round pick. Now, they'll go because of need, but nobody's really in the position to say, okay, that's the guy. I think they have to really seriously consider franchising Kirk, which I didn't think they would do, but they may have to, just to buy a little more time.
We're talking to Joe Theismann. Yeah, I think it felt like Washington could have wrapped this up with Kirk Cousins last year. And I don't know if they were rolling the dice, Joe, of just saying, let's see if he can do it in back-to-back years. Is that the sense you get from what happened?
That is, and I think that was the sentiment that I felt from reading things and hearing things, that the organization said, let's see what you can do. Well, you're right. They rolled the dice, he rolled the dice, and he came up 7, and they came up craps at this point. But now, it's not to say that a deal can't be done. But what's impressive about this is, in this day and age where everybody wants to see what someone else is saying, you haven't heard a word out of Kirk's camp, and you haven't heard a word from the Redskins. And as long as there's silence, I think there's dialogue. When things start to get a little more public, then it becomes a little bit more of a problem.
Do you have any doubts about Kirk Cousins?
I don't. I think, we forget he's young. Yeah, everybody wants things right now. I mean, let's instant satisfaction. Everybody's saying, okay, let's see what Dak's going to do in his second year. And then, Kirk has to prove himself. I think he's proven himself. A quarterback like Kirk Cousins, there aren't many of them in the league, Dan. I mean, we have 32 football teams. There's probably a dozen of them that give you a chance to get to the playoffs and maybe have a shot at a championship. And young ones have to continue to develop. But you look at what Andrew Luck has gone through and the money they committed to him. I mean, that's going to be the that's going to be the contract that everybody's holding up and looking at and saying, hey, look at this number. You can't do that. I think each team has to look individually at what they can afford to do to support the organization to have a chance to win. I certainly think Kirk Cousins has, like I say, the value that I believe he is. He should be compensated in a fair way, but it's a two-way street. You have to understand that the organization needs people too.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.